In times of universal deceit, truth is the only rebellion left.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Everett Piper, and this is The Rebellion. Today's topic is taken from the Ask Dr. E files, Q&A, as opposed to monologue per se. And I'm going to respond to this question. What exactly is fascism, and is it accurate to accuse Donald Trump and MAGA of being fascist? One more time. That's the question for the day, and I'm going to respond to that in the rest of the show. What exactly is fascism, and is it accurate to accuse Donald Trump and MAGA of being fascists? Before we get into my answer to that question, however, I want to remind you that the sponsor of the rebellion is an organization called equippingthepersecuted.org. Equipping the Persecuted. This is a ministry that provides food, shelter, housing, clothes, schools, orphanages, and hospitals to our brothers and sisters in Christ who are suffering for their faith in Nigeria. Most of the persecution that's taking place within the church right now, against the church, worldwide right now, is taking place in Nigeria. People are being martyred for their faith. Children are being left as orphans because mom and dad got killed simply for being Christian. And if you're a pastor, good luck. Your life expectancy is very short in Nigeria because of Muslim extremists and whatnot. So, what is Equipping the Persecuted doing? As I said, they go in and provide schools, orphanages, they provide hospitals, they provide medical care, they provide food. They go in and try to help our brothers and sisters in Christ make it at a time of terrible persecution. In addition to that, they also go into these villages and towns and teach these people how to secure their communities, how to protect themselves, and potentially stop the persecution before it ever starts. So if you want to help people that desperately need your assistance, they need food, they need clothing, they need health care, they need schools, they need orphanages, and they need to learn how to secure their communities. Make a tax-deductible gift today to equippingthepersecuted.org. Go to their website, pull it up, be prepared to make a gift, tax-deductible. It is a 501c3 organization, equippingthepersecuted.org. Back to today's show. Again, the question is from the Ask Dr. E file, and it is this. What exactly is fascism? And is it accurate to accuse Donald Trump and MAGA of being fascist? I'll read the question in more detail here. Dear Dr. E, we hear a lot about fascism today. It seems that every time somebody like Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, Tim Walz, AOC, Bernie Sanders, etc., seems like every time somebody on the left opens their mouths, they tell us that MAGA Republicans are fascists and that Donald Trump represents an existential threat to democracy. The thing that strikes me about this, however, is that I get the feeling that those throwing around these accusations don't even understand what their words mean. Can you help us with this? What exactly is fascism, and do you think it's accurate to accuse Republicans and Donald Trump of this crime? Are they fascist? Signed, Exhausted Political Junkie from Kansas. Now, if you've listened to the rebellion at all, you know I've addressed this issue in the past. I've talked to you about what fascism is. We've taken it back to its root word, fascist. Fascist was a Roman bundle of sticks bound together so tightly that it could not be broken. The positive part about a fascist was unity in the common bond. The negative part about it is the collective power that can crush any dissent. So, with that as the context, and we've talked about that particular etymology of the word in the past, let me give you a more detailed answer to this particular question from Exhausted Political Junkie from Kansas. Here's my answer. Dear Exhausted, your question is perfect and exposes an underlying cancer that is eating away at our culture's very fabric. This malignancy is the misuse and utter disregard for the definition of words. It seems this is true especially in the political realm, where the proper use of the English language apparently doesn't matter anymore. Words that just 5 minutes ago, in the context of human history, were clearly defined and commonly understood, have been co-opted by progressive demagogues to mean something precisely the opposite of their original intent. Examples of this would be words like green, for example, and gay or male and female. Green used to be a color. It wasn't controversial. It wasn't political. Now, green is a political agenda for global warming and climate change. If you're not green, then you are evil. You are an ignorant rube who believes that it's okay to raise cattle, to eat beef, and to drive a gasoline powered car rather than a EV. So green has been co-opted. Gay used to mean happiness. You go back to some of the old Christmas movies with Bing Crosby and Bob Hope, etc. They were still in those movies using the word gay as being synonymous with happiness and joy. Today, obviously, it means debauchery and licentiousness rather than just joy and happiness. Male and female. We don't even know what male and female means any longer. Men and women are now social constructs rather than biological realities. We've turned the world upside down. As the prophet Isaiah warned us, good has become evil, evil has become good, bitter is sweet, sweet is bitter, up is down, down is up, night is day, and day is night. And Isaiah warns us and says, woe unto them who reverse these definitions. So we ought to take that seriously. So rather than listen to the politicians who have proven they will manipulate any and every word to such an extreme as to claim that they're pro women, while at the same time denying the definition of a female, I'll say it again. Rather than listen to these people who are saying that they're actually feminists, that they're pro woman, but yet they deny the feminine and the definition of a female, and they say it doesn't have an objective meaning, but some dysphoric delusional dude can subjectively define himself as a woman if he just feels like it. Rather than listening to these people and their convoluted reversal of definitions, let's go to the dictionary and to history to define what fascism actually is. Merriam-Webster, for example, defines fascism as a form of government in which, and I quote, a dictator controls the lives of the people through centralized power and severe economic and social regimentation. Did you get that? A dictator controls the lives of people through centralized power. Again, back to the issue of a fascist. The dictator binds everybody together so tightly, controls everybody, controls the group, centralizes that power, collects the bundle of sticks, binds them together so tightly that he then controls the lives of the people through that power. That's the fascist. That's the negative aspect of fascism. Webster further states that fascism is an authoritarian philosophy that allows no dissent, no disagreement, and exercises the forcible suppression and silencing of opposing views. And I quote that. That's straight from the dictionary. Forcible suppression and silencing of those who want to dissent and those who disagree. Again, I talked about it in a previous episode. Ideological fascism as opposed to racial or cultural fascism. You must share our ideas. You must parrot what we say. You must think what we think, talk the way we talk, walk the way we walk. You must be political as we are political. And if you disagree, if you dissent at all, we will crush you through our centralized power, the control of the gang, bound together so tightly that nobody can dissent. That's what Merriam-Webster tells us about fascism. Other defining characteristics of fascism are collectivism and elitism. The obvious examples of this were the overt anti-Semitism and racism that was evident in Hitler's Third Reich and Mussolini's demand for literal lockstep compliance to his every whim and wish. So Hitler and Mussolini are quintessential examples of fascist leaders because they demanded that everybody come together as a collective and that the elitism of the blonde hair, blue-eyed Aryan philosophy, for example, that these are examples of racism that is evident in the Third Reich and in Mussolini's Italian fascist demand for lockstep compliance with the cultural direction of the country and of the culture and of the race. Also, it's important to acknowledge the epistemological history of the word if we want to use it accurately. One of the best ways to understand fascism, as I've said before, is in its root word. Again, what is it? Fascist. Fascism comes from the word fascist. Fascist is spelled Fasces. It's a fascist. Again, it's that picture that you see in some of the artwork of the United States or the European West, where you have a bundle of sticks bound together with a hatchet head in that handle, those bundle of sticks, and it represents the power of the collective, the power of the common bond. It can be good, as in the United States of America, but it can also be very bad if it becomes racist and it oppresses and silences any dissent or expels anybody who doesn't look like, talk like, act like the group that's in power. A fascist was bound together so tightly that it couldn't be broken. I've already told you that. Initially, it represented the positive attribute of strength and unity. We've talked about that. Later, however, the fascists came to symbolize a group's dominance over the individual. We've implied that so far. This is why one of the key characteristics of modern day fascists is their demand that everyone must walk like them, talk like them, think like them, and vote like them, or they will force you into compliance via the crushing power of the many against the one. Now, as I'm describing as I'm describing the dictionary's definition and cultural definition, the epistemological and historical definition of fascism, the etymological history of fascism, who do you think looks more like a fascist today, the progressive or the conservative? Just ask yourself that question. With all of this objective definition of fascism, I have a couple more questions for you. When you look at the Republican Party versus the Democrat Party, which one seems to be more open to debate and discussion? Just think about it. Republicans versus Democrats. Who's more open to debate, dissent, and discussion? Republicans or Democrats? Which party is trying to silence those with whom they disagree? Just asking the question. Who's calling for more censorship? Okay. And even the criminalization of dissenting voices. The textbook example of that, who's criticizing Elon Musk's purchase of X and calling him a fascist because he wants to open the platform back up for free expression and stop censoring, policing, and eliminating views that are unwelcome? Which party? The party of Elon Musk or the party of those that disagree with him and are wringing their hands and having a fit over the fact that he now is allowing Twitter to be used more robustly and more freely in the market square of ideas? Who's the fascist here? Ask yourself that question. Who's calling for more censorship and even the criminalization of dissenting voices, as I've just asked? Which party demands that we celebrate ideas that many of us find to be broken and distasteful? Which parties are guilty of this? Ideas such as critical race theory, intersectionality, racial privilege, and sexual nihilism. Who is saying that parents must now bow to the power of the state when it comes to raising and educating their children? The state of California, the state of Oregon, the state of Minnesota, the state of Colorado are all establishing laws right now that literally say they can take a child away from the parents if the parents don't comply ideologically. If the parents don't like the ideas of their kid transitioning from male to female. If a mom and dad steps in the way of a kid that's 12, 13, 14 years of age who says that he's the exact opposite of his biological sex, that he was born a boy, but now he wants to become a girl, if the parents step in the way and say, no, you can't do that. You're still a minor. You still are subject to our authority under our roof and our home. And the answer is no, you can't do that. We'll get you counseling. We'll take you to see a pastor, a Christian counselor, or whatever, but that idea is broken. We're not going to allow you to butcher your body. In California, they can take your kid away from you now. In Colorado, they can take your kid away from you. In Oregon, they can take your kid away from you. And in Minnesota, the same thing. So which party, the Democrats in those parties, California, Colorado, Oregon, Minnesota, the Democrats who rule in those states who are saying the power of the fascist will crush the dissenting parent, or is it the Republican Party that rules in Oklahoma, Texas, Tennessee, and Ohio that's saying no, we're not going to allow the state to exercise that type of control in the private lives of American citizens and take the authority of parenting away from mom and dad and place it upon the state. We're just not going to do that. Which party seems to be more of a fascist versus the other? Who is saying that parents must bow to the power of the state when it comes to raising and educating their children? Which candidate in the last election or in the upcoming elections is calling those who don't think like them a basket of deplorables? Okay. Who is telling us that we will be forced by threat of law to pay for chemical castration of minors and surgical execution of babies at full term? Who is arguing for more and more government authority over your daily decisions? What party thinks that we should be able to tell you when you go to church, where you can go to school, and what you can teach your sons and daughters, what car you can drive, and whether or not you will even be able to buy gas appliances to cook your food and heat your home? Don't forget where we've just been under the Biden administration. They were telling us that they were going to start eliminating our freedom to buy gas appliances for our stoves, for our homes. They were telling us that our food choices were going to be limited. They were telling us that we couldn't go to church during the COVID pandemic, but yet you could still go to a club, you could still go to the liquor store, but you couldn't go to church. You tell me which party is more fascist in the way it's governing, in its philosophy of how to its philosophical foundation for our society and for our culture. Which one? And here's a final thought. As you ask yourself all these questions that I've just rattled off, remember this tactic, which has been attributed to Saul Alinsky, who was Barack Obama's intellectual mentor as well as Hillary Clinton's. That's a fact. Saul Alinsky, who authored the book Rules for Radicals. He was the political mentor for many on the left, as I mentioned, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and even Kamala Harris, all of which either were our president or were on the very verge of becoming our president had it not been for God's intervention and providence in stopping Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris. Here's something from Rules for Radicals. Accuse your opponent of what you're doing as you're doing it. To create confusion, cloud the issue, inoculate voters against any evidence of your guilt. Rules for Radicals, Saul Alinsky. So when you're being accused of being a fascist, when the right is constantly under this barrage of accusations from the progressive left, fascism, 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 you're a fascist, Donald Trump's a fascist, MAGA is it's a fascist organization. There's the rise of fascism, and democracy is in danger because of conservatives. Fascism, 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 they cry. Remember what Saul Alinsky said. Accuse your opponent of what you're doing as you're doing it to create confusion and cloud the issue and inoculate voters against any evidence of your guilt. Could it be that the more people like Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, AOC, David Hogue, and everybody else on the left of center, Chuck Schumer, the list goes on. Could it be that the more these people call Republicans fascists, that they just might be admitting more about themselves than they intend? Could it be that? In other words, with one finger pointed outward, an accusation in accusation of you, you're a fascist. You're a fascist. They have three fingers pointed back at themselves. They're distracting from the issue by accusing you of doing the very thing they're doing while they're doing it, with the intent of causing confusion so that you don't notice what they're doing to take your freedoms away. I'm Dr. Everett Piper, and this is The Rebellion.